Testing, testing. Hello, everyone. Welcome and thank you so much for coming to our author event tonight, part of Banned BooksCon. Um, my name is Allie Trevino Murphy, and I am the Beyond the Page manager. So I just have a couple of announcements before we get started. This event is part of Banned BooksCon. It's a celebration of the freedom to read hosted by the Dane County Public Libraries. And the con goes through this Saturday, October 7th. So we have several more events and hope that you'll be able to make it out to some of those as well. Tomorrow at noon, there is a global live stream event with Jacqueline Woodson that will be hosted in person at the Fitchburg, Oregon, and Deerfield Public Libraries. And then on Thursday at 6 p.m., we have Ellen Hopkins coming to the Sequoia Library in Madison. She'll also be speaking and signing books. Plus, we have several banned books clubs and Freedom to Read celebrations, and you can find the full schedule on the Beyond the Page website for those. Um, Banned Books Con was made possible with the support of Beyond the Page and the National Endowment for the Humanities and Madison Community Foundation. If you don't know about Beyond the Page, it is an endowment that supports free public humanities programming in all 28 Dane County public libraries forever. And we do have some, do we have surveys? Yes, we have some surveys for you from Beyond the Page, and they're just very short, they're two-sided, and we ask if you wouldn't mind after the event just letting us know what you thought, and then you have the option if you'd like to give us your email to get on our monthly email list. And I also want to thank the Wanakee Public Library for hosting this event tonight and Lake City Books in the back of the room for offering a book sale. Um, After the talk, we will be taking questions from the author, and I just wanted to note that we expect respectful interaction and that anyone who engages in disruptive behavior will be asked to leave, but I'm sure that won't be an issue with this beautiful, wonderful audience we have tonight. And uh, Wanakee folks, is there anything Wanakee specific I need to say? Nope. Okay, great. Then, without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce our author tonight. Mike Curato is the author-illustrator of the wildly popular Little Elliot picture books. Mike's debut title in the series, Little Elliot Big City, has won numerous awards and has been translated into over 10 languages. His newest picture book, Where is Bina Bear, deals with social anxiety with playfulness and acceptance. It's really cute. I just read it to my kids this afternoon. He also wrote and illustrated his debut young adult graphic novel, Flamer, which has received critical acclaim and won several awards, including the Lambda Literary Award for Young Adults. Born and raised outside of New York City, Mike has been drawing ever since he could hold a pencil. As a boy, Mike had a thing for cars, especially classic ones with big fins and chrome eyeliner. He collected Matchbox cars and Hot Wheels and drove them up railing highways and turned carpets into parking lots. But more than anything as a kid, Mike dreamed of making picture books. Mike attended Syracuse University, earning a BFA in illustration. After college, Mike moved to Seattle, where he worked as a graphic designer for the better part of 10 years. But he still dreamed of making picture books. That dream became a reality when Henry Holt Books for Young Readers offered Mike a 3-book deal featuring everyone's favorite polka-dotted elephant, Little Elliot. These days, Mike lives in Northampton, Massachusetts, where he likes to draw, write, and eat lots of cupcakes and ice cream. So please join me in welcoming Mike Curato.
Thanks so much. Hi, everyone. Just gonna put this here. Oh, how's everyone doing? Great. All right. Yeah. I'm Mike. Thanks so much for joining me tonight. I'm going to talk a little bit about my journey as an author and an artist, and let's just get started. So, though I am very good with a map, I've managed to get lost many times in my life, but that's not always a bad thing because sometimes it takes getting lost to find something worthwhile. So, I've broken this presentation down into a few parts. We're going to start with where am I? Once, when I was very little, maybe it was 4, I got lost. I was in a Hallmark store looking at all the cards and running around, and suddenly I couldn't find my grandmother. I went to the counter and told the cashier, I was like, we prepared for this. Like, I know what to do, find an adult. So she took me by the hand and she led me around the store, and there was my Mima, like tucked away somewhere I didn't notice her before. Um, and, it's not a big deal to us grown-ups, but as a kid, that was pretty scary to suddenly be missing all of your love and support and sense of safety. Um, so here's me and my family before my brother and sister came along and stole the spotlight. Um, and here is uh, my projected journey as a child. So I had big dreams of like working for Disney and making lots of money and buying a car and having a dog. I've I've done all those things except making tons of money, but we're getting there. Well, I haven't worked for Disney, but that's fine. I let it go. But yay! Sounds exciting, right? And here's some of my early work. I've always loved making art. It's where I found my earliest joy. This is Dog Flanked by Tulips. Um, and I loved stories. I loved reading stories. I loved telling stories. These are some of the books that I loved when I was growing up. I also grew up outside New York City in the suburbs, but I was obsessed with uh, old New York. I thought it was just so cool, much more exciting than where I lived. I loved Richard Scarry. Um, I loved his worlds that he would create, and every time you open a Richard Scarry book, you could find something you've never noticed before, even after all these years. Um, I mean, check out that crocodile car; like that's pretty rad. Um, and I loved words and pictures together. I wrote stories. I wrote poetry. Um, I used to copy Disney. That's what helped me learn how to draw. And I also have a sweet tooth. So that is a reoccurring theme in my work. You'll see a lot of dessert. Um, then I got to high school and I was feeling especially lost. I was not very popular. People weren't always very nice to me. Don't worry, I did not actually burn the school down. But daydreaming. But my new projected journey was one, get out of here. Two, go to college, be cool, have artsy friends, and then graduate and get a job as a comic book artist. Um, Yay. I was obsessed with comics as a kid. I used to hoard my extra lunch money, and I love to eat. So, um, that's saying something about my commitment. I would just get the bare minimum for lunch, put that money aside. At a certain point, my dad was like, "No more comics. Too many comics. You're wasting your money." And I'm like, "Okay." And I used to sneak to the comic book store. I told my parents. Well, I used to take private art lessons, which was amazing that I had supportive parents like that. But I may have fibbed and told them that the class started like 15 minutes before it actually did, so that after I got dropped off, I'd like make sure they were gone, and I'd run around the corner, buy all my comics, and then get to class. So my hoarding continued. But I learned a lot. I learned a lot from comics. Again, like Disney, I would copy um, and then in high school, I took an art appreciation class that really opened my eyes. Um, and for the first time, I was like considering searching for meaning in art. Like it wasn't just about making pretty things. Um, this is a painting called Christina's World by Andrew Wyeth. And my art teacher, who I still talk to today, Mrs. Nichols, she put this up on the screen and she's like, okay, let's talk about this painting. And, we're all kind of like, it's pretty. And she's like, uh-huh. What do you think this is about? And we're like, oh. Um, but the more she talked about this painting and talked about his family, this is a portrait of his sister, and she has polio. Um, I kind of had this aha moment where I'm like, oh, art can mean something. Art can move you. Art can tell a story. And then I was like off to the races. Like everything that I drew or painted had to be imbued with like deep meaning. So that's me in high school. On the left, that was a sort of independent study about my cultural background. So I'm half Filipino and half Irish. So that was about combining those two cultures. And there was a painting I did about the Holocaust. Um, Also in high school, I tripped over this book in the bedroom that I shared with my little brother, who's 8 years younger than me. And I read Frog and Toad for the first time as a teenager, and I was like in love. I was like, these guys, they get me. um, and I stole it from my brother because he shouldn't have left it out like that. I was like, you don't appreciate this like I do. But so it paid off for me. Then I did get out of high school and I uh, went upstate to Syracuse. This is what it looks like for the first week that you're on campus, and then the clouds come for the rest of the year. And I studied illustration, and you can see I was kind of all over the place in college. I hadn't really found my voice, but I think that's great that I was able to experiment and try different things. I also had a comic strip in the school paper that was weekly, so that kept me on my toes. Um, and I was very inspired by contemporary illustrators, especially I was drawn to um, children's book illustrators. And I kind of rediscovered my love of children's books. Then I had the good fortune to study abroad in Italy, in Florence, and I'm seeing things like this every other day or every day. So, that had quite an impact. And I also got to go to the Bologna Book Festival, which is basically the largest children's book festival in the Western world. And I got to see so many different types of children's book art. Things are a little less constricted outside of the States when it comes to children's book art. So it's something that I still look at today. And I was experimenting in Italy with like not being so precise, trying more abstract things. And then I came back home and I was ready to graduate and get out of Syracuse. um, but my last year of college, I apparently did not get a haircut, but I did get a job working with kids in Syracuse inner city schools with literacy core. So basically, I would go in and just read with kids. And I learned so much about how kids interact with a book. Um, and these are some illustrations I made for the worker manual. And these are just some examples of the art I was making my senior year before I went out into the world. And this is from my first book that I tried to get published. I thought by the time I graduated, I would have a book deal all lined up and have my career waiting for me. That didn't quite happen. Um, but yeah, I got my degree, hooray. And then, congratulations, you have a bachelor's in fine arts. What do you do now? Illustrators don't really go to work for a company. Maybe a few folks go work for Hallmark or something like that, but um, the rest of us have to figure something out. Uh, so on to the next phase of life here. It was time to find out what I was made of and who would I be in this big world. And I, for no reason at all, moved all the way across the country to Seattle, Washington. Um, it's very pretty. It's very good food. Not that I could afford it when I got there, but I was sending out what's called a book dummy, soliciting publishers, and this was, you know, pre-digital days, so you still got mail. um, and I was hearing back from people, and they were kind of interested, but it never went anywhere. And um, you know, at the time, it just felt like the end of the road. So post grad kind of left me feeling adrift, and I had a loss of community and focus. I didn't have the deadlines that I really relied on in school to keep me on track. And it was just all about survival and putting my dreams on the back burner. And, you know, paying the rent and buying some groceries. I slept in that sleeping bag on the floor of my apartment that I shared with three other folks I graduated with. I worked for Starbucks as a barista. And then I was feeling like I have to do something creative or I'm going to bust. So I ended up getting an internship with a design firm in Seattle. Um, they took a great chance on me. I had zero design background, but I showed them my portfolio and they were like, okay, well, we can tell you have a good eye, so we'll figure something out here. So I did an unpaid internship for 10 months, but I just think of it as free school. Um, and that kind of launched me into the design world in Seattle. And then I got a job as a receptionist at a creative staffing agency. So I kind of learned the ins and outs of that industry and got my foot in the door that way. Um, so I was doing a lot of work for, well, once I quit my receptionist job so they could actually give me other work, um, I worked for Cranium, the board game company, doing prototype design. I did digital illustration work for Microsoft. Um, and meanwhile, I was still making personal work, but um, I was still trying to figure out my voice and everything. Um, my paintings weren't really coming out how I'd hoped. Um, and I was really haunted by something that a professor in college told me once. He said, like, your paintings are never as good as your drawings, as like the concept drawing. I was like, oh, I'm a failure. But then one day I was like, why am I a failure? Like, why don't I just draw? Like, what's the big deal? And so I just started drawing again. And for a long time, I would pine away thinking about making books. And it just seemed so out of reach. Like, how do you get published? It just seems impossible. And I tried to do all that I could to even start climbing. Um, I was the weirdo in the kids section of the bookstore, just like trying to see what was new and like interesting, trying to catch up on the classics. Um, these are some of my favorite books from that time. This is The Mysteries of Harris Burdick. by Chris van Allsburg. Um, Olivia by Ian Falconer, who we lost this past year. This was a pretty pivotal book for children's publishing. Um, just a really amazing sense of design and character. The Arrival by Sean Tan, which is an absolute masterpiece. It's it's sequential. It's like a graphic novel, but it's completely wordless. And wordless storytelling, I can assure you, is one of the hardest things to do. And I was also influenced by uh, art with the capital A. Edward Hopper has a big place in my heart. His cityscapes, his focus of New York City, of course, appeal to me. They're just very haunting. This is Mark Ryden, who kind of started out doing a lot of things for like Rolling Stone magazine and CD covers and stuff, and then he went more fine arts. And he has this sort of like lowbrow, semi-surreal style. Um, and I was raised Catholic, so I love like lots of symbolism and stuff like that. And this is Michael Soa, who does a lot of anthropomorphic work, um, like very sophisticated, but like cute little animals. You may recognize some of his paintings from the movie Amelie. So I was continuing to do all the things I was taught I should be doing. I was sending out postcards of my work to art directors and publishers, and I never heard back from anyone. And everything felt like a struggle. Um, but I thought that by constantly doing stuff and thinking good thoughts was making progress, and then I'd clear a peak just to see there was more to climb. Like there was no payoff, and it was very demoralizing. And here's what I would do. I would go to my studio and I would start staring at the paper and I would just say to myself, okay, think of something brilliant. And I just didn't know where to start and what to make and what I wanted to share. It was an emotional time. And over the years, I had many offers. Any artist will tell you, random people will come to you and be like, I have a great idea for a children's book. Let's just make one and see what happens. I've done zero research on how the industry works, but we'll be rich because this is an amazing idea. Um, but someone that I knew, she had a book that she wanted to make, and she was actually going to like pay me for my time. And I was like, oh, that's a new one. Okay, sure. Uh, so we made this book called Mabel McNabb, and I didn't love the cover design, but it was a great exercise for me um, to illustrate a full book. And she self-published it, and we sold some things locally in Seattle, but it was just really helpful to me to know that I could do it. Um, and that gave me some confidence to like pick up the mantle again. Um, and meanwhile, I was fully established in the design scene in Seattle at this point, and I was like managing a design team at a place called Geocaching. Um, But graphic design is all about telling someone else's story. It's your job to clearly tell your client's story. Um, but I wanted to tell my story. Um, so I took a leap of faith, a little Indiana Jones reference, and I started a gay wedding invite business with a friend of mine. And part of our 5-year plan was like, okay, we need to like quit our full-time gig and like do something that's a little more flexible so that we can work on our publishing goals on the side. And I was doing a lot of freelance work after I quit my full-time job. Um, so things for big companies like Amazon or small like dog walking services or your local drag queen. So after all the paths that seemed to go nowhere, I ended up going back to myself. I thought I lost my way, but really, um, I was on the right path the whole time. Just took a while to figure that out. And thinking about my memories, thinking about what was important to me, um, I decided to make something for myself. I realized I've spent all these years like doing things all these other people wanted me to do. Um, so even if I didn't get published, I felt like it was still important that I had to make art for myself. So here's me, little baby me, and that is a little elephant stuffy that my Mima gave me when I was a baby, and it was one of my favorite treasured stuffies. Um, and here's some folks from a movie called Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. I was obsessed with the Isle of Misfit Toys. I thought it was an amazing sounding place, and I'm like, I want to be banished there. Like, these toys are cool, and I love that polka dotted elephant. And for years and years, I would doodle this elephant in my sketchbook, um, and it was kind of like a combination of those two elephants um, that just kind of remind me of my childhood and kind of came to represent my inner child. And when I thought to myself, like, I need to make art for myself, when I kept flipping through my sketchbooks to get ideas, this elephant just kept popping up. And so, I was combining, memories from my childhood, my artistic influences, everything I learned during my struggle, and put it into this character. Um, and I feel like we take all those experiences and knowledge, and when we filter them through our hearts and put them on paper, um, that is art making for me. And this little guy popped out, and he made me so happy. And so I just kept making more. And I decided to create my own deadline because I don't work well without a deadline. I booked a show at a local cafe, and they're like, "Okay, you've got a month and a half. We need this many hanging on the wall." So I just kept making and making. Um, so between these elephant pieces and the pieces I created for that Mabel McNabb book, I had a full show. Um, and I was like, I'm onto something here. And I got involved with an organization called the Society of Children's Book Writers and Authors. And someone there told me, oh, you should go to the New York show. Um, it happens every winter, and there's a, a judged portfolio show, and all of the art directors and editors in New York City are like invited to come check out these portfolios. And so it's like a good way to start networking, and then the conference also has lots of different resources for learning about the industry. I'm like, okay, all right, this will be part of my 5-year plan. Um, so I went, I dropped off the portfolio. I was very nervous. I was like sending my kid off to school for the first time. I was like, okay, be good. And then on the last day of the conference, um, I found out that I won the portfolio showcase, which was not part of the 5-year plan, but that was okay with me. And so this is 10 years after graduation, just to give you a timestamp here. And when I got back to my inbox later that day, something was happening. So my head was spinning. Um, And I ended up signing with an agent, and I met with several publishers who were interested in this character. It was funny. The first publisher I spoke to, they're like, "We love this elephant. Who is he? What's his story? Have you written a story?" I'm like, "Oh, definitely. Yeah, so many stories. I have them 1 minute, you know." And then when I signed my agent, I'm like, "I don't have any stories." And she's like, "It's fine. It's fine. Everything's fine." She's like, "Thankfully, publishing moves at a glacial pace, which is very frustrating sometimes, but can come in handy other times." So we worked together on putting together a pitch, and we sold. Um, it used to be Ellie, but we changed it to Elliot. We sold Little Elliot Big City. We sold a series, 3 books, which was pretty big, to Henry Holt at Macmillan. And they used to be in the Flatiron. Unfortunately, no more. But um, so yeah, Little Elliot Big City was my first picture book. Yay. So basically, it's a combination of my character, my love of sweets, my fascination with old New York, um, and a childhood memory of being young and overlooked at a deli counter. And that became a book. Um, and it's funny, I hadn't thought about how much my books fit the theme of lost, of like being lost and found. Um, in Big City, Elliot feels lost in the big world and finds a friend who puts everything in perspective. In Little Elliot Big Family, Elliot feels the loss of not being with his family and finds a new one. In Little Elliot Big Fun, Elliot loses his nerve. He's very scared of the rides, but he has a good friend who helps him find some courage and inspiration. In Little Elliot Fall Friends, Elliot and Mouse play hide and seek. And Elliot is physically lost and has to follow his nose to find where he belongs and find dessert. And then there's Merry Christmas, Little Elliot, in which Elliot has lost his Christmas spirit. Poor guy. And he can't seem to find it in the obvious places. Instead, he finds something else that is lost. And in the end, everyone finds what they're looking for. We're always asking each other, "How are you?" Which is an especially fraught question these past few years, and one that people aren't always inclined to answer truthfully. But when we ask ourselves that question, there's really no avoiding the truth. A few years ago, I felt like my whole world was falling apart. My parents were going through an ugly divorce, and then my own marriage unraveled before my eyes, and I was at a loss I had never experienced before. So I ran away. Conveniently, I had a speaking engagement at Highlights in rural Pennsylvania, and I built a larger road trip around that. And when I first arrived, I was so unsteady, I did not know how I was going to get through the weekend. I didn't want to be there, but I had to put on a happy presenter face. There were people depending on me. And I started doodling during someone else's talk, and I just kept drawing this bear who was trying to hide in somewhat ridiculous ways. Um, I continued north from there to Maine, where I found some peace. And I was very lucky to have a friend with an open door and an open ear, and I could finally just breathe. And then, looking through my sketchbook, I saw that bear again, and I thought to myself, is this a thing? Um, and I sat on the grass by the water, and I wrote and sketched and wrote and sketched. And in one day, I created Where is Bina Bear? Sometimes we do not want to be found. Sometimes we need time alone. But it's always good to know that there's a friend nearby who won't let you get too lost. And it's good to know that even when you're lost, you can still find joy. And on a clear summer eve, zipping across the water on the bow of my friend's whaler, I found something I had been missing for a long time, which was my smile. So, I remember there was a time when I was little and was so proud and confident about who I was. But as I got older, I lost those pillars of inner strength. People had questions for me. Why was I the way I was? I didn't really understand those questions at first. Like, what do you mean? Why am I me? I'm me. But after being questioned and bullied about my identity for so long, an identity that I didn't even fully grasp, I began to ask myself that question: why am I like this? And I knew with certainty that the answer was because there's something wrong with me. Flamer is the story of Aiden Navarro, a 14-year-old Filipino white mixed kid who's away at scout camp in 1995, the summer before freshman year of high school. He's navigating friendships and bullying and how those things can overlap sometimes. He's dealing with racism, religion, body dysmorphia, and all that is just the backdrop to Aiden accepting his sexual identity. And as you know, I wanted to make comics since I was very young. And once I got into publishing, I saw my chance to finally make some, and I wanted it to count. And I had a lot of inspirations I could look to for guidance. And in case I didn't mention it before, I'm a huge X-Men fan, which makes a lot of sense, you know. People with special powers who are trying to help those who hate them, you know, coded. I had, all these different inspirations, beautiful, complete worlds, stories that give a voice to the underrepresented, uncomfortable stories about real life, stories that made me feel seen and safe, stories about the awkwardness and brilliance of adolescence, stories that understood how hard it is to look like this, and mentors who said, of course you can do that. This is Linda Barry, who is a cartoonist, and I took a writing workshop at a conference, an illustration conference I went to, and it was maybe an hour or two of my life, and like I walked out of there thinking like, yeah, I can do this. Like I always wanted to make a graphic novel, but I was like, it just seems so impossible. But um, yeah, sometimes you just need someone to say, you can do it. And of course, I had myself as a resource. I had my memories. I had the voice of my inner child who is still with me, still needing the love and attention I was lacking. Um, and when I was a teenager, I went to a Christian camp one summer and I met one of my best friends my whole life. Her name's Laura, dear Laura. And we became pen pals because we didn't live near each other. And there were times in our lives where we were each other's only friend in the world, it felt like. And those letters meant so much to us. And we could share our feelings and make each other laugh. And her letters were something I could look forward to. And we kept all of our letters. And when I started working on Flamer, Laura surprised me by scanning every letter that I ever sent her and sending me a PDF. So I could actually read um, firsthand from my life from that time. I was not a popular kid growing up, and it was hard for me to make friends. I did not feel good about my body. I always felt different in a million different ways, some more obvious than others. I just didn't fit in. I had a lot of questions. There was so much I didn't understand, especially about myself. And I struggled to find a place I felt safe. I didn't feel safe in the world. I didn't feel safe at home. Even my mind wasn't a safe place. And it felt like that was never going to end. I wish I could say that the journey gets easier. Sometimes there are stories inside us that we can't hide from. And eventually, we know it's time to tell it. And it can be overwhelming because we don't want to go back there, back to who we once were, back to pain, back to the truth, back to darkness. So why? Why write a story like this? Why drudge up the pain of the past? Why make others uncomfortable? And why make myself so vulnerable when I've finally created a safe space for myself? I do it for myself, for the scared kid that's still inside me. But I do it for people like myself, for the scared kids that are out there right now. Scared kids who are going through hell. I was there too once. And there was a time I wanted nothing more than to make it all stop. Life can scare us to death. And it's the job of those of us who survive it to show others that they can too. Because we need each other. Because we are each other. Today, I find myself a bit lost again. The life rafts I set adrift keep getting overturned. And I am not alone. Censorship has reared its ugly head. By banning these books, by disparaging their creators, by attacking the educators who try to share them, there is a clear message being sent to our youth. We only want you if you do what we say. We only want one type of child here, and if you're not that type of child, then we don't care. We don't care what happens to you. We don't care what others do or say to you. We don't care what you do to yourself. Pieces of my story and others. Sorry. Did that play? It doesn't matter. Pieces of my story and others have been taken out of context and degraded as pornography. There's no room for nuance. There are no exceptions for having difficult conversations. There's only fear-mongering and ignorance. There's only shame and the unspoken signal of violence. This becomes echoed by people who have not read my book. People don't want to take the time to understand. They want to react. They say that these banned books are harmful to our youth, when in actuality, they were created to protect them. Sometimes I feel so lost, lost in so much hate. I am at a loss for how to get through to people who claim to be protecting our youth while simultaneously disenfranchising them. Life is messy. It is our job as adults to prepare our youth for what is coming. Children now have an unlimited amount of information and disinformation at their fingertips at all times of day. Do we leave them to try to make sense of everything on their own? Or do we make room for the uncomfortable conversations that could dismantle shame or even save a life? But through all that hate, I have still found hope. I have heard from adults who have been through everything that Aiden and I have been through. And I've heard from teens and parents about how they have connected with the book. And they're not just reading and saying thank you. They're out there fighting for their rights. Here is a group in Katy, Texas, who took it upon themselves to collect banned books from publishers and distribute them to fellow students in their community that they felt needed them. And I like to watch this when I feel like things are so bleak. I feel buoyed by their strength and courage, and it fuels me to continue. This is the what. This is the why. This is the who and the where and the how. Because there's nothing more impactful in literature than feeling seen. Nothing more than affirming one's very existence, especially at a time in one's young life when so many of us question why we're even here and why we should stay. Children's literature can be a beacon for youth who feel lost. It is our responsibility as a community to keep that light burning bright. Because one book, One sentence, one image can make a child feel found. Thank you. Thanks so much. Um, we have some time for Q&A. If anyone feels like there are questions. um, and I want to give a shout out again to the library for having me here, and for Lake City Books for coming and bringing my books along. So I'm going to be signing also in a few minutes. But yeah, yeah, great. Great question. Yeah. So for years, I kind of thought of him as Ellie. And then my editor pointed out, well, there is an Ella the elephant, and she didn't want anyone getting them confused or like going to the bookstore and like asking for the other one instead of mine. And um, so I thought about it and I changed it to Elliot. I mean, Ellie is in there. But now I could never see him named anything else. Like he is totally Elliot to me. So yeah, but good question. It's funny, like remembering that making books is still a business, and there are these like other things we have to consider when we're putting it out, and that was one of the weird ones. Yeah. You had a question? Yeah. What am I working on next? Well, I just finished illustrating a picture book that is based on a song that went viral on TikTok, which is "If I Were a Fish." Um, and that comes out in December. Fastest book I ever made. Um, every now and then, a publisher will like buy something. They're like, "It's hot right now, and we have to put it out now." So they push everything aside, and we just like ram it through. And I illustrated this entire book in 3 weeks. Yeah, it was bananas, but it's done. um, and I am working on my first adult graphic novel. It's all written, but I'm illustrating it right now. It's called Gasians. Um, and it is about four friends in Seattle in the early 2000s, kind of yeah, supporting each other through, you know, their shared experiences, gay Asian men, but they're also very different people. And so, there's some conflict. I'm still working on my elevator pitch, but yeah, it's a lot of work. So working on that, and there are a few other things lined up. But yeah, thanks for asking. Yeah, hmm yeah. Well, I'll tell you that Flamer came out in 2020 in the fall, and for like over a year, it was all accolades and nice things. And then a state lawmaker in Texas came out with this McCarthy era like list of 800 some odd books that he demanded be um, uh, investigated, was the word. And if you cull through the list, there's a pattern. A lot of the books are by or about people of color, by or about queer people, singled out for being pornography. Yeah, so that's when it all started. You know, it was a distraction mechanism, like, look over here. And so people started freaking out about these books. And um, I mean, they were kind of saying the sky was falling because, it's easy to say we have to protect the children because of course everyone wants to protect the children, but also you know, I mean, there have been absolute lies told about my book, about other books. You know, and Flamer also, you know, it's a young adult book. There are a lot of books on that list that are young adult, and so it's like, no, this wasn't made for second graders. Like, of course they're not going to be reading this. Um, so anyway, that is how it started, and it has just snowballed. And it's going to take, you know, um, communities just showing up and standing up for the books that are in their libraries and in their schools. To make a difference, because there are book banning organizations like Moms for Liberty that are very organized, they're very well funded. Um, and you know, now I've been reading, there are things coming out where this was a political plan. You know, one of the co-founders of Moms for Liberty is the wife of a politician in Florida, and he wanted a way to, um, you know, get some moms involved in politics, and he found that. Um, so I think there are people that want to be doing the right thing, who maybe think they're doing the right thing by banning these books, um, but probably haven't even read them. So it's a sad state of affairs right now, um, and it's not slowing down. Um, my book was one of the top 10 most banned. You know, it was banned in something like 26 different school districts, but was challenged in many more, something like 60 to 70 places. Um, and that was the school year 22 to 23. Was it 21, 22? And now there's a new list that just came out with the top 10. So Flamer's no longer in that top 10, which is, I don't know how to feel about that. I'm like, yay. But it's like, but now there are these other books that are being banned. You know, it's like, it's because mine's been banned so many times, they've moved on to other books. Like, let's ban these ones now. Um, you know, and it's a slippery slope. I mean, we're just uh, where is the line? Where do we say like, okay, we've banned enough books? This, you know, this would have been unheard of in the United States not long ago. Like banning books, like that's what authoritarian countries do. That's not what we do here. Like I thought we were about freedom of speech. Something I heard, but anyway, I can just keep rambling about censorship and the freedom to read. So I'll leave it there. But okay. Oh yes. Hmm. Yeah, I think, you know, if you're living in an area where books are being challenged, um, whether you have a child in the school or not, like you have to show up like in person to these meetings. You have to speak up, um, even if it's not for the full allotted time. Just be like, I am against this. If you're in a community that is not experiencing that, or at least not experiencing it yet, like make sure it doesn't, you know, like um it's not just like paying attention to who you're electing to fill your school boards and your town boards, but it's also implementing systems to make sure, you know, like I know that there are places that have implemented systems like, oh, here's the process, like if you're going to challenge a book, here are the things you have to do. And like, so some places are like, you have to have read the book. Like you have to, some places now you have to submit a book report. Um, but orgs like Moms for Liberty, they're like trying to get ahead of that by pre-filling out these forms for people, but also doing a bad job at it. Where a librarian could be like, okay, you obviously didn't read this book actually. But yeah, it's gonna take just like I said, community involvement it's all hands on deck, really. Um, and then yeah, with elections, local elections matter. Um, yeah, and it doesn't matter what your political leaning is. This is important to protect everyone's rights. Um, so I'm not here to tell you what party to vote for or anything. I'm just saying, like, tell your elected officials, like, protecting your freedom of speech is, important to you, and you don't want this in your community. So, um, and then there are other ways of getting involved. If you want to do more, there's the National Coalition Against Censorship. That's an org you can get involved with. The American Library Association, of course. Both of those organizations will have a lot of resources online for you. I'm very involved with PEN America. They have a lot of great talking points for how to combat these things in town meetings. And by the way, I just made this T-shirt for them, and it's available via their shop. And so all the money goes towards that organization to help them continue the fight against censorship. Yeah. Uh, and there are also free libraries popping up, right? You could always make a little free library in your community, and you can stack it with whatever books you want. Um, yep, if it's just a little box on your front yard, yep, that's your own business. Great question. Yes. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I appreciate that question. There were some difficult parts of the book that I felt nervous about when it came out, for sure. And when I was working on it, my agent told me, like, don't hold back. Just like with your other books. I mean, this is way more raw. Just write, and then we can always scale back. And when we submitted it to my editor, she said, I don't want to change a thing. And I was nervous, but I also knew when it came out, I was like, no one can really fight me about what's in this book because this is my life. Like, this is based on my experience. I've lived through this. And um, yeah, so there's nothing I would have added. I feel like I got it all out when I was writing it. But I wouldn't take anything away either because everything that's happening is just kind of proving a point to me that it's like, well, that's why this needs to exist because there are so many intolerant people in the world that um, they just don't want to take the time to try to understand. Like, we all come from different experiences, and um, but just because I haven't lived someone else's experience doesn't mean it doesn't happen to other people. And I think that's the big message for me. Um, to folks that are like, I'm not so sure about this. It's like, well, it's okay. Like, um, that's how we get to know each other and grow, is by reading about different experiences and having the uncomfortable talks. So yeah, nothing I would change. Sure. Mhm. Yeah, it has been translated into a few languages. We've got Italian, Korean, and Russian, surprisingly. Yes. The Russian version has an adult rating on it. It's 18 plus across the cover, which is like, ooh. Um, yeah. So, but I haven't heard of challenges. I haven't heard of challenges abroad. Yeah, I was kind of waiting to hear something about the Russian one, but I haven't heard anything yet. Um, it's been very embraced in Italy. I think because there's a lot of like Catholic subtext to it. There are a lot of uh, LGBTQ people there that relate to it very much. So getting lots of love from Italia. I haven't heard anything from the Korean publisher, so um, yeah. But I mean, the States is really where it's been making waves in, for good, for better or worse. So yeah, cool. Well, thank you again so much for having me, and yeah, I'm gonna be at the table for a while, so come say hi. Great, thank you.